Paramount Plus just dropped one of the best comedy specials of the year with South Park Not Suitable for Children, and you can stream it right now for free on us when you try Paramount Plus for 30 days with the code BUTTERS. Not only do you get to experience this wonderful special, but you also get to experience a mountain of backlogs from childhood nostalgic movies and television shows, live TV, more exclusive content, and more. Click the links in the show notes below to check it out and start streaming. For Victims and Villains, my name is Josh, and today we're jumping into the second round of CarousHEll. This is the second. So a couple years ago, I had the opportunity of attending the very first Creature Feature weekend in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Just a complete side note, I absolutely love that convention and film festival. If you ever get a chance and you're ever in the area, cannot recommend it enough. I'll provide a link in the show notes below. But among some of the films that I had a chance to see the very first year, one of them happened to be a little independent film called CarousHEll. And before I jump into talking about its sequel, one of the things that I will say in preparation for making this is I went back and rewatched it, and I just have to say, because I hope the filmmaker will watch this review, but I was a little bit probably too harsh on the film. I had a blast with it on a second round, and a lot of the things that I had problems with in the beginning, I didn't necessarily have problems with it on the second time. So go support independent film and go check out CarousHEll. But CarousHEll the second picks up after the events of the first film, and our protagonist, Duke, who is a reanimated carousel unicorn, comes to find out that he has ties to Nazis and tries to kill them, but also tries to uncover his past and his connection. Let's jump into it. I gotta say, when I went back and rewatched the first film, I really just had an absolute blast with how absurd it was and just how goofy it was and how it didn't take itself too seriously. I ended up really liking it, almost borderline loving the first one. And coming into CarousHEll 2, I can say that this kind of feels like the complete opposite. This one feels a lot more mature. It feels like it's taking itself a little bit too seriously. For starters, Duke is now a father in this movie, and that was kind of weird. I'm all here for the concept of weirdness for weird's sake, but this one in and of itself, the son just kind of happened to feel like a more of a plot device than an actual source of development. Also, Duke now being a father, it just kind of seemed like, again, it really kind of dove into a lot of that tonal issues that I had with this film, is that it seemed to take itself too seriously. I would have even liked to see the villain, kind of the leader of the Nazis, kind of be really over the top and really animated, and even she and some of her, most of the majority of her cohorts just kind of seemed to be a little bit, again, too seriously. And I feel like with the concept that these movies go around, you can't take yourself too seriously because you end up just losing yourself to the seriousness. I will say probably the bright spot of this movie is a character of the movie named Klaus. I'm not going to give any context. The actor's name is Mark McConnell Jr., and he was the highlight of the movie for me. I felt like he understood really kind of the tone of the first film and kind of brought that in here, and he's the bright spot. I also felt like this movie dragged because of the seriousness, and again, don't get me wrong, there are definite sprinkles in here of comedy that do work and absurdity that kind of do bring back notes of the first film. But as a standalone film, this movie just kind of really loses the magic of what made the first film so good, and it just kind of felt kind of tonally uneven. And as a result, things like character development, pacing, and even kind of the goofiness of this just kind of really seemed to fall at the wayside. Steve Rudnitsky, who plays the pizza guy from the first film, he's also the writer, co-writer, and director on this film. And I really do like the fact that this film feels like, out of the three, we'll be talking about the third one in just a little bit, but out of the three, this one kind of seems like the development piece of the entire trilogy. And so I have a love-hate relationship. Like, in the grand scheme of like the overarching story for the film, I understand the purpose of this sequel, but as a standalone film, this is definitely not only the low point for the trilogy. This was just a really tough watch to get through altogether. I will say one of the brighter spots of this movie is how Rudnitsky actually expands the lore. I really dug that. I thought that was really well done. But again, some of the more redeeming elements of this film just kind of seem to be far and few between. All right, well, let's run this one through the Rorschach rating scale, shall we? I'm going to go ahead and give CarousHEll 2 a 2 out of 5. I think this movie does really hit the nail on the head when it comes to terms of some of the character development, its importance for the grander story being told. But as a standalone movie, like I said, this movie felt really hard to get through because the jokes didn't always land, the pacing was weird, and I just had a lot of issues with the tone. It just kind of seemed like they kept conflicting. Some of it was really goofy, and then some of it was really serious, and it just kind of felt to lean more towards the latter, in my opinion, than it did kind of balance between the two. Right now, you can actually stream both CarousHEll and CarousHEll 2 on Tubi, or you guys can click the links in the show notes below and support the filmmaker directly. His name is Steve Rudnitsky. And also, at the same time, you not only can you support him on Patreon for short films, etc., but you can also pick up not only this film, but the trilogy and other films that he has also made physically on DVD and Blu-ray. And it might sound like a weird thing to talk about, but let's talk about mental health of CarousHEll 2. If you guys are new to our content, Mental Health Moment is where we'll take a theme of mental health out of the film, which we're talking about, deconstruct it for a few moments in the hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. Despite some of its tonal issues, like I said, this movie does dive into and really bring a lot of character development and redemption for our titular character, bringing the CarousHEll of Duke the CarousHEll Unicorn. I think this movie does a really great job at exploring the mental health of becoming a newfound parent or a life-altering decision, and really kind of how that makes you reflect. And I feel like I can't speak to the mental health of being a parent because I don't have kids, nor do I want them, as I talked about in our clock episode earlier this year. We'll provide a link in the show notes below and at the end of this video. But I do have lots of friends and family that have kids of their own, and I see and also hear from them all the time about the challenges of being a parent, and especially when you have a past as decorated as Duke. Being a parent can be really hard, especially there are great scenes in here where there are some really hard conversations. And I feel like this movie kind of just being asked really hard questions by a kid that doesn't fully grasp the concept of what is going on or what is transpiring. I feel like this movie handles a lot of that stuff really well, and also reminds people that they're not alone. And sometimes, despite how checkered a past is, this film is also a great reminder that none of us are too far past either gone or being irredeemable. And I think, honestly, that's a second thing that I feel like I can speak to more than the parental aspect of this, because one kind of leads into the other, but also at the same time just being reminded that you are not your past, you are not your mistakes, and though sometimes they can be as hard as they can be, it's also worth taking a moment to breathe and remembering that may be of who you were. It's not who you are. And you're currently on the road to recovery, whether that is from self-harm, suicide, or depression, or addiction, remembering that you are not your past. Your past is a part of you, it's a part of your story, but it is not your identity, it is not your defining factor. And with that, also, I think that much like Duke in this film, you also find redemption, and also at the same time, new identities come from places that you can least expect. Always be open to what life is going to do and the places that it can take you, because it may just surprise you, and it may surprise you the effects that those surprises have on your mental health. If you or someone you know is struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, please click the links in our show notes below to check out our mental health resource library. In the show notes below, you guys will also find the previously discussed links to support Steve, our mental health resource library, links to our Patreon to support us bringing mental health resources into places like film festivals, conventions, etc., as well as more movie reviews like this one, links to our podcast network, social media, and that subscribe button. So until next time, remember to raise some CarousHELL. We'll see you next time.